All right, you guys, so we have looked at two different types of comparison problems so far this past week in math. We've looked at additive problems and multiplicative problems. The first one we did was comparing by adding or subtracting to see how many more someone did or someone had. And then we worked recently on multiplicative problems where we multiplied or divided to find out the difference in our comparison. So today we're going to try to figure out which one to use when we have a situation. So for you football fans out there, we're going to start with a football problem and see if we would add, multiply, subtract, or divide to compare.
We have the Georgia Stadium, which has 71,250 seats in it. And then if we pan over here, we have the Rose Bowl Stadium, which has 91,136 seats. So looking at the two numbers already, we can tell which one has more seats just by glancing at it. It is the Rose Bowl. So we need to find out how many more seats does the Rose Bowl have in it than the Georgia Stadium. Are we going to add, subtract, or multiply, divide? Well, we can show this by drawing comparison bars. First, this blue marker's not working too well, is it? No. And then we want to make sure we make this one smaller because it does not have quite as many seats as the other one. So when we did this, we want to find out how many more seats this stadium has. So think about them having the same amount of seats here, but we have a little bit more in this area. So we have that gap, and we want to find out how many more seats there are in the Rose Bowl Stadium. So what would we do? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide? That's right, we're going to add or subtract. In this case, we're trying to find out this area that is missing. So we're going to take this number and we are going to subtract 71,250 from it. So if you do your subtraction and find out the answer, I'm going to pause the video for a second to see that you can subtract it before I do. When I solved, I got 19,886 more seats. When I thought of it mentally, I was thinking there's about 20,000 more in the Rose Bowl Stadium because 91 is about 20,000 more than 71. So this is super close to 20,000. We're just a few hundred off. So that would be your answer for that problem. So when I asked you the question, I asked how many more seats are in the Rose Bowl Stadium than the Georgia Stadium. So we have to actually figure out how to make an equation for that. So there's two different ways we could have done it. Remember I said we could add or subtract, but in the end we actually subtracted. So if we want to show an adding equation, we can use a variable to show how many more. So we start with how many were in the Georgia Stadium, and we want to know how many more to get to Rose Bowl. So this would be a way to write an addition equation. That's like our situation equation. We want to find out how many more there are. So then n would equal that number that we found, 18,000 whatever. Okay. If I want to see how many fewer seats they have, then I would do 91,136 minus 71,250 equals n. So that's going to show us how many fewer there are in here. So we indeed could add or subtract, but in the end this would be subtracting to find out n as well. Okay, so that's how we write an equation. Okay, I have two more problems I want to go over together before I send you off to do your work for today. We're going to look at a fraction problem and figure out if we're going to multiply, divide, or add, subtract. So our problem says, Trey spent 3/4 of an hour doing homework. Kylie spent a half hour. How much less time did Kylie spend doing homework than Trey? Okay, so here again we have Trey. He spent 3/4 of an hour doing homework, and Kylie spent half of an hour doing homework. Okay, so if you think of a comparison here, which person did more homework? Is 3/4 or 1/2 hour a bigger number? When you would compare them, you would find out that Trey actually spent more time doing his homework than Kylie did. So he spent 3/4 of an hour, which is about this much time, and Kylie spent about a half an hour, which is only half of a bar. So see how he has a little bit more than she has done? Okay. So I'm actually going to erase the part that they did not spend time doing homework on, and then we're going to use that as a comparison model. So here we have Trey's 3/4 and Kylie's 1/2. We're trying to find this missing piece. So again, this time, are we going to multiply and divide, or are we going to add and subtract to find our answer? Well, we're looking for the missing piece. So again, we're going to be doing the subtraction, or we could say the addition to find out the difference. 1/2 plus n equals 3/4. So what is that difference between it? Okay, so remember, when we are adding or subtracting fractions, we need to find common denominators. So I want you to pause the video and do that while I solve my problem, okay? When you solve, you should get 1/4, because 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4, and when you subtract your numbers, you will get 1/4. So how much less time did Kylie spend? She spent 1/4 of an hour less than Trey did, or Trey spent 1/4 of an hour more doing his homework. Okay, so that is the same. That's an additive comparison problem. The last problem I want to look at is going to be a little different. It says, in a track meet, a 1,500 meter race is how many times as long as a 60 meter race? So you can already see the wording of the problem is a little different. You can kind of zoom in on these words here. How many times longer? Okay, so in this case, we're going to be using multiplication or division to find out our answer. So I'm going to set up an equation. So remember, is can be an equal sign. So we have a 1,500 meter race, and it is how many times x? X is our variable. How many times as long as a 60 meter race? So our equation says 1,500 meters is equals how many, we don't know our variable, you can use any letter you want, how many times 60 meters? So when we're trying to find out this other factor here, we have our product already, and then we're multiplying these two numbers together. Am I going to multiply 60 times 1,500, or am I going to divide one by the other? That's right, we're going to divide. So if we write out our problem, 1,500 divided by 60, we're going to find out what that x is going to equal. So pause the video one more time, see if you get the same answer as me. When I solved, I got 25. So again, our label, it says 1,500 meter race is how many times as long. So we're not going to put 25 meters, we're going to say 25 times as long. Always look at your question and figure out what our label will be. Okay, so that is a multiplicative comparison problem. We're comparing how many times longer it is. Okay, a little different than the last two problems.
So in summary, when you are doing your homework, I want you to think of this. In an additive comparison problem, the underlying question is, what amount would be added to one quantity to produce the other quantity? In a multiplicative comparison problem, the underlying question is, what factor would multiply one quantity to produce the other? So in one case, we're adding more to something to get the other answer. In this case, we're multiplying something to get the answer. Okay? So you're going to be doing 2 pages today. The first page is going to be 257, and the second page is 258. All right, so let's just look quickly over 257. So on 257, it says, for each problem, draw a model and write additive or multiplicative comparison. So you need to decide if we are using adding and subtracting, or multiplying and dividing, okay? So on the line, the type of comparison would be additive or multiplicative. Then you need to write an equation to solve. So looking at numbers 1 through 4, I want you to think about which type you would do and how you would solve the problem. Think about the language and all that, okay? The next page, 258, has very similar problems. You are just solving. I'm going to have a document up for you where you can write your answers into those problems instead of signing into Think Central today. So I want you to show me what you did on 258 and have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow.